terrible pacing, misplaced nostalgia, showcasing all of the wrong elements, and releasing at the worst possible time. This is how a single reveal trailer nearly killed Call of Duty.
We are getting breaking news out of Switzerland.
Geneva has suffered a massive attack.
Death count continues to rise, and there's no end in sight.
This is Top Cat Sovereign. Divert and deploy all available assets immediately.
Holy shit.
Infinite Warfare was always going to be a hard sell. It arrived at the tail end of a time filled to the brim with futuristic first-person shooters, including 2 previous future COD games, a recent Halo, Titanfall, Destiny, Doom, and many others, all featuring jetpacks, futuristic weaponry, other worlds, and advanced movement. The market was oversaturated, and gamers were begging for something set in the past or at the very least modern. Games, and pretty much any other entertainment industry, follow cycles of interest. When something new and different comes along that is popular, nearly every publisher wants a piece of the action. This results in an explosion of sequels, reboots, copycats, and new big-budget IPs that all capitalize on the latest trend. The trend for futuristic first-person shooters that I would argue began in early 2014 with the release of Titanfall, ushered in a new paradigm of gameplay that was all about advanced movement and futuristic technology.
What you're seeing is advanced warfare.
Because of this innovation, players were invigorated and excited about these new styles of gameplay that differed so much from what was quickly becoming stale. But naturally, all trends eventually die and get replaced by a newer trend. And after the disappointing release of Call of Duty Ghosts, its creator Infinity Ward, at the emergence of the new movement trend, decided to change directions and dive all in into a new game, building upon some of the ideas of a project they had already previously tinkered with: future warfare. The problem is they began creating Infinite Warfare near the beginning of the advanced movement trend and wouldn't release their game until 3 years later. It's tough to predict how long a trend will last, but as a general rule, if you're just starting work on a product when a trend is beginning to reach its stride, you've probably started too late. Of course, hindsight is 20/20, but this was a bit of a gamble for Infinity Ward. And as we now know, it didn't pay off. Infinite Warfare came out at the wrong time. The trend was over and players were tired of the advanced movement and futuristic gameplay styles and wanted something different, especially considering this was the 3rd Call of Duty in a row that used non-traditional gameplay. And while all of that definitely hindered Infinite Warfare right from the get-go, it still could have been received much better. The game offered a lot of interesting new features, cool environments, had a deep campaign, and starred recognizable actors. But Infinity Ward made several key mistakes with this reveal that cemented the trailer as the most disliked trailer of all time, severely hurt its sales and player count, and ultimately resulted in a game that is nearly completely forgotten by the entire fanbase.
It's been 10 years.
The first big mistake Infinite Warfare made was how the trailer was paced and laid out. Even though it's Call of Duty, a series everyone is familiar with, Infinite Warfare was still a new story in a new game world disconnected from the rest of the COD franchise. Which means for the trailer to be effective, you need to introduce new characters, factions, motivations, and the overall world to the audience, and ensure you are effectively pulling them into that setting you've created. You need to give them a reason to want to know more. And because people's interests in a trailer tend to fade quickly if they aren't drawn into the world, you need to come out swinging with something that will captivate them. If you take too long and are too slow to showcase what's unique and what sets this game apart, you're going to lose interest. And people will start to dislike it or even just click off and forget about it. Some great examples of captivating trailers includes the opening to Battlefield 1's reveal trailer, that literally came out swinging and quickly cut between all of the different and interesting aspects of the game, and Dying Light, which also highlighted all of the different gameplay mechanics and environments right near the start and kept the engagement high and constant. There will be a link at the end of the video. Infinite Warfare, however, took a much slower approach with their pacing and editing, and severely delayed really introducing the viewer into the game world. First off, each shot generally lasts for a second or more with some slow cuts and transitions while keeping the music very light, which results in the energy of the trailer feeling overall low. Now this isn't necessarily a bad thing if you can provide a buildup of interest and excitement, and prepare the scene for the energy to kick up a notch when it cuts to the action. But the problem is, Infinite Warfare didn't properly build up that excitement. It takes about 50 seconds into the trailer before we get to any real combat and action. And even then, this action is largely meaningless as it's very mundane, doesn't show us anything unique, and the stage hasn't been properly set for what's going on. Prior to this firefight, we're faced with images and shots of some sort of attack, but we aren't given any context for what any of it means. Who are the attackers? Who are the civilians? Where are we? Why do I care? It's not until a minute into the trailer, in the middle of the big shootout, that we get some kind of idea about what's happening.
The biggest surprise attack in the history of the world. How could they not have seen us coming? One of our own.
Even with this though, we're still not getting enough information to care. Okay, so it's a surprise attack from one of their own? Who's they? Well, we'll tell you after you see some more shots from this random firefight at a staircase and the slowest combat roll I've ever seen in my life. But just before 1:30, we finally find out, seriously though, that is such a slow and unnecessary combat roll. He could have easily walked 2 steps to the side. But just before 1:30, we finally find out who's attacking.
Let me make our situation absolutely clear. We are now at war with the Settlement Defense Front.
Oh, okay. Makes sense. So in the first 1.5 minutes, all we've been given is that there's a smoky surprise attack and a big gunfight at a tower. We haven't been given any reason to care about any of this. We don't know what's going on, and the energy and pacing has been so low and uninteresting the entire time that there's no reason to be excited. But all of that was really just a tease before getting the cut to the real action and the music drop. And then we actually get a bit more of an introduction into what the game will offer and the space setting we will play in.
You got eyes on this, Reyes?
Affirmative. Let's get in there.
This is after 1:50 seconds. For a quick comparison, you can watch the entire Battlefield 1 reveal trailer twice in the time it takes Infinite Warfare to get to anything remotely interesting. Once the music drops and they get into space, the trailer actually does pick up a bit more, showing off some of the interesting locations we'll play in and some of the combat scenarios. But peppered throughout this portion of the trailer are also a lot of unnecessary shots that don't really tell us anything or show any exciting aspects of the game. Every shot in a trailer, especially a reveal trailer, needs a purpose. What are you communicating with each shot? What aspect of the game are you showcasing? And this trailer is filled to the brim with shots that are either repeats or don't really communicate anything. This creates unnecessary bloat to the trailer and extends the runtime much longer than it should. This, coupled with longer shots, missing context, and an incredibly drawn out intro before we get to the excitement and music drop, severely slows down the pacing and makes the entire trailer pretty visually unappealing to watch and feels like a slog just to get through. But the slog of the pacing could have been worth it if they focused on interesting and engaging aspects of the game, what made it unique and sets it apart. And this brings me to the second major mistake they made with this trailer. They showcased all of the wrong things. It felt like somebody handed them a thumb drive of clips taken completely random and out of context from the game, and they spliced it together to match the song as best as they could. For a game that essentially follows a civil war between 2 factions that span across the entire solar system, they spent half of the trailer at a staircase. And this roll. Yes, I'm still on the roll. There's vehicular combat, fighting on many different moons and planets, space combat, unique and interesting weapons, and a top-notch cast of recognizable faces. Infinite Warfare stars the writer of the game, but also some great talent and marketable faces like Claudia Black, Kit Harington, and some Irish dude.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Among others. But they show just about none of these characters, and they don't explain the layered and interesting story about the last remnants of Earth's decimated fleet going on basically a suicide mission to desperately try and stop the rival forces from taking control of the whole solar system. And while the trailer features a little bit of the space combat and some of the interesting locations, it's too little too late. And they don't flesh out the unique aspects this game actually offers. I never did end up playing the campaign for Infinite Warfare, but looking up the plot synopsis, the game sounds pretty sick. But none of the story comes through in the trailer, none of the actors I'd recognize are shown, and any real reason to care about the game world just isn't there. But I suspect that may have been intentional. They probably knew ahead of time that this trailer wasn't going to be received very well, so I'm guessing the thinking was to highlight Earth for the bulk of the trailer so it would feel more familiar. The problem is, it's essentially irrelevant, because we're still going to space, we're still going to different planets and moons, we're still fighting in spaceships and in zero gravity. Marketing is all about setting the proper expectations for what you're going to offer. So they might as well have just leaned into it and emphasized the sci-fi nature of the game while properly explaining the story, the characters, and edited it in a way that was faster paced and more engaging. And to make matters worse, they botched an element that flows throughout this trailer and has the ability to tie everything together and positively sway viewer emotions. And this brings me to the final major nail in the coffin for this trailer. The music was the wrong choice and took far too long to start. Music and sound is a critical piece of any good trailer. Properly timing the sound brings everything together to create a cohesive experience and allows the developers to help sway emotions in the way they want to, improving the flow and pacing of the trailer. The wrong song choice or using the music improperly will have the reverse effect, where it brings down the entire trailer and makes the whole thing feel disjointed. The first misstep with the music in this trailer was the song didn't begin until they got into space. 2 minutes in. As I've hammered home a few times, this is far too long into the trailer to make the drop interesting and exciting, and it doesn't help carry the flow of the trailer. Most of the trailer lacks any kind of special music to elevate what's happening on screen. And because it doesn't elevate any particular emotion, the sound gets lost in a mess of shots and set pieces. And by the time the main song has kicked in, the viewer has already checked out, which makes it very hard to bring them back in when the beat drops. The second misstep was the song choice itself. Now, I totally understand what they were going for. They used a cover of Space Oddity by David Bowie, a song with a theme that is quite fitting. But you want to know how not to connect to your target demographic? Use a song that was released and popularized before they were even born. Space Oddity was released in 1969, and yes, that is the same year as the moon landing.
You got eyes on this, Reyes?
Affirmative. Let's get in there.
And while it is a really good song, it simply will not have nearly the same impact on the majority of their audience that a more modern song would. Companies will generally use older memorable songs to elicit nostalgia in the viewer. Nostalgia is often the association with the previous and simpler point in time filled with positive emotions. Companies will use this nostalgia to make the viewer feel those good emotions that take them to an earlier time in their life that is looked back on favorably, usually childhood and adolescence. And the target demographics of most movies and video games generally falls into the 25 to 50-year-old age range. This is why it is so common for trailers for movies and TV shows especially to use songs and themes from the 1980s, because their target demographic grew up during that period, or grew up close to it, and will look back on it as some of their best years.
Than any of us could have ever imagined.
They were trying to kill me. And not in a fun way.
Now, game demographics also fall into this age range, but with a bit of a slant towards younger.
Never give up.
Ready, Javelin 1?
Let's go! You are freelancer.
Hostage secure.
Hearing those songs can help the player feel better and more at home, thus connecting the feelings they have with the song towards the game. Space Oddity by David Bowie will pretty much only trigger nostalgia in somebody that is in their 60s or older. And while it is definitely a pretty well-known song, people that weren't alive when it released aren't going to connect to it as strongly as a song they were alive for. I do really like this song cover though, and honestly, it's probably the best part of the whole trailer, but I feel like they could have used another song more effectively, especially if they wanted to capitalize on nostalgia, or at the very least brought it into the trailer much sooner and oriented the action around it in a way that would engage and connect with the audience more. But ultimately, all the problems with the pacing, showcasing the wrong elements, and using the music ineffectively all led to the Call of Duty Infinite Warfare reveal being a very poor game trailer that failed on most levels to captivate the viewer, ruined any hype and excitement players may have had, nearly killed the game before it even launched, and severely hurt Call of Duty's brand and reputation until the next year when they came out swinging with the style of game people were begging for. A reveal trailer is the first impression players will get of your game, and if you lose them with that first trailer, it is incredibly hard to get them back. And the terrible reception of this trailer resulted in it being the second most disliked video on YouTube at the time, beaten only by Justin Bieber's Baby.
When I was 13, I had my first love.
It affected the reception to every trailer afterwards, and while we don't have exact numbers, from all of the information I can piece together, it did cause a serious drop in sales. One report estimated that sales were 50% less than the previous game in the franchise, Black Ops 3, and Steam peak player counts show an even worse number. Of course, it's still COD, so it sold a boatload of money, and there is a debate even with all these issues if it still outsold Battlefield 1, which released at the same time, as Infinite Warfare had higher physical sales in 2016, but didn't account for digital sales, didn't have the same staying power, and didn't nearly match the same player count on Steam. So it's hard to say which sold better in the end. Either way, it was pretty close and quite a bit less than what Infinite Warfare could have sold. And in such a funny piece of irony, you can see such a stark contrast in a teaser for a game that doesn't fall into any of these traps and does everything right. And it's at the end of the Infinite Warfare reveal trailer.
Pre-order the Legacy Edition and get Modern Warfare Remastered.
There's quick cuts, it highlights a multitude of different scenes and environments. It maintains high energy throughout, and uses sound super effectively by cutting the trailer to a steadily increasing heartbeat, so the viewer will feel growing excitement and tension before finishing off with a heavy-hitting classic quote. It keeps the interest, it utilizes nostalgia exceptionally, and it captures the viewer's attention and creates a desire to know more, which is ultimately what you want from a trailer. And honestly, I would shudder to think what the sales for Infinite Warfare would have been if Activision didn't tie Modern Warfare Remastered to the game and attach this awesome teaser at the end. But could Infinite Warfare have been saved had they made a better trailer? They still definitely would have gotten some backlash because of the style of game and the timing of release, but I think it would have been received much better, gotten higher sales and interest, and would not have ended up as the most disliked trailer of all time. But hey, that's marketing. If you liked what you watched, slap that subscribe button. And for those that actually played Infinite Warfare, do you think the hate was deserved? Do you think a better trailer would have saved the game? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to keep the good times rolling with some of the trailer analyses I mentioned earlier, or to watch a video on why Resident Evil has failed 3 times in a row to make a good multiplayer game, click on one of the videos on screen. And until next time, stay peachy.